Hello everybody. We're here with doing another podcast. This time we've got Maritsa. Now Maritsa is an employee retention and a specialist and an HR professional with an HR background and everything else. And she's she's currently sat in sunny Greece. Anyway, how are you doing, Maritsa? You good?
Yeah, really, really good. Thank you. Yeah, it's sunny but cold.
Yeah, which I can't get. That's totally unfathomable to me.
I
So,
know.
so tell us a little bit about yourself, Maritza. How did you end up working in the field you're in?
So I hadn't actually thought I would be doing it when I went to university. I was like, oh God, what do I do? I did a catering degree because I thought, oh, I might end up in Greece one day and I could use that. And it was actually on my placement. So it was one of those degrees where you did a placement. That was where I got my first exposure to HR or personnel, as it was called then. I worked at a major sporting venue and was responsible for their staffing for about 9 months during the busy sporting season. And yeah, absolutely loved it. I am really, really grateful for that opportunity because actually things could have been a lot different. But yeah, and then I went back to uni. I actually did my dissertation on employee motivation and employee engagement as opposed to catering concepts or things like that. And so, yeah, I've always had an interest about people at work. And ever since then, really, I've been in HR roles, mostly in house until about 4 years ago when I set up my own business. Initially, very sort of generalist HR support for business owners needing perhaps some fractional support rather than a full-time person. And then more recently, I've niched into employee retention. So specifically helping business owners to stop their employees from leaving unnecessarily. I guess I was scarred from a couple of contracts that I did with a few businesses, and so have seen firsthand what happens when you don't pay attention to this kind of stuff,
Mm.
and the sort of toxic environment that it leaves, and people feeling really unhappy. They're not really concentrating on the work they're doing. They don't have any loyalty to that company. So having seen it and the impact of it, I thought actually this is something that's really important, not only because it's the right thing to do for people. And that's where I get called sometimes pink and fluffy, but actually because it makes business sense. Employee turnover is a huge cost. And
Yeah, I
so,
don't think people realize, do they? They don't
no,
realize how expensive it is. And when you think about it, you bring somebody on board and you then, train them up and you spend time training them up. You may be buying them IT equipment. You may be then sort of getting them logged onto the system and all of the other stuff that goes with it. And then you teach them how to do the job and then you introduce them to people. And the thing is, there's a lot of expense there, but because it's an intangible cost, people
yeah,
don't necessarily see that. People see a cost of recruitment as going to a recruitment agency and, paying a percentage of the annual salary to do that side of things.
that's
So
it.
employee retention is really, really important.
Yeah.
So did you just kind of recognize that there was a need for this, or was it something that you just thought, actually, I just have to try and improve the thing? What was the motivation behind going down the employee retention route?
So I think it was a couple of things. Actually, it's probably more than a couple, but I'll try and condense it. So one, as I said, was my experiences and seeing the negative impact that it had on a business and the cost, the actual pounds value. Secondly, there is I think where it comes to people, that what I see and what I hear is that there's still this perception that people are seen as a cost and an overhead rather than investment. So, it's the attitude is very, very different. And actually, when you start shifting to seeing your people as a huge part of your business and actually the thing that drives your business forward, you then realize actually this is an investment. I will get far better results if I treat these people like an investment rather than a cost. And yeah, they're I think those are probably the two main reasons, but I think, oh, sorry, a third reason is that a lot of the time, especially with smaller businesses, whether they're startups or they're scaling up, or even if they've been established for a while, they're still in the SME space though, there's this attitude, I guess, of, oh, we don't need to worry about that kind of stuff because it's just happening. So there isn't that intention to sort of consider the people within that business and the value that they bring. And then what happens therefore is that you get a lot of this reacting. So like, oh my God, this person's not performing, we need to exit them. Well, actually, if you were 9 months ago, perhaps thinking, oh, something's not right here, let me have a chat with this person, you may be in a completely different position to where you are now. And the amount of time that you've wasted and money, because if that person isn't performing, they're not at 100%.
Yeah.
So that there's always a financial element with this that I think again is unseen. So my view is that there is a need for us to be a lot more intentional, and for business owners, and I say that as CEOs, MDs, general managers, whoever it might be, to, I guess, shift that mindset of not reacting, but actually thinking about it, anticipating needs, meeting needs, not only, as I say, because it's the right thing, but because actually it makes business sense. You're not wasting time. You're not wasting other people's time, and you're not wasting that money as well.
Yeah, yeah, it's there's a lot of that goes on, and I think, with in the modern world, we are now becoming much more aware of mental health issues and
Mhm.
things like that. It's okay and it's acceptable to talk about mental health. Back in the day when I first started working, which was feels like in 1847 at some points, but when I started working as well, mental health wasn't really seen as a thing. It was just a case of, if you were feeling a bit sort of fed up at work, you just were told to man up and get
Yeah.
on with it. And the problem is now, well, the good thing is now that people are actually recognizing that mental health is a thing. But I'm sure there are probably still employers out there that don't necessarily recognize it the way it could be. One of the things that I've had when I've been talking to clients who've employed people is, they might have high absences, or they might have
Mm.
people who are at work and actually not really there. They're there in body, but they're not there in mind.
Yeah.
I think the term's presenteeism, isn't it, or something like that. But
Yeah.
you have this kind of thing that they need to sort out. So when you go into a business, how do you assess a situation? Is it something that the owner or the senior manager, that's the senior leadership team that brought you in, have told you we've got this particular problem, or do you go in and how do you do it, like an assessment of a business?
It will depend. I can help business in two ways. One is if they're kind of got to that point where actually high employee turnover, they see the cost, they're in a position that actually they've got no option, they need to do something about it. I also go in sort of earlier on and help them preempt that. So that could be that they actively want to prevent that from happening, or equally, they might just be sort of a small business that's getting started and they need some HR stuff in place, but they just don't know where to start. So, depending on that approach, obviously, I'll deal with it differently, but usually there is an assessment initially around where is it that you want to get to as a business? What is your business goal? Is it to expand? Is it to do more of the same and just to get stable? Is it actually that you want to get to a position where your business is valued at X amount and therefore you want to sell it? What is that you're wanting to achieve? Because that will then define what we work on. Sure, it could be that actually high employee turnover is a problem, but actually, if we know where you're wanting to head, we're not only solving or going to work to solve the immediate issue, we're then going to set you up for success, depending on that goal. So an example is a client that I've worked with recently. They're not necessarily a startup or a scale up. They've been running for quite some time. They had a couple of employees. But they hadn't really articulated what they wanted to do with their business. They'd started it from their own front living room, and then it expanded and sort of grown organically, but they hadn't had that time to stop and think. And so when I asked them that question of like, where is it that you want to go to? Like, what do you want to achieve here? They were a bit sort of like, oh, we've never thought about that before. So when I then spoke to them sort of, a few weeks later, they're like, actually, this is work that we never knew we needed to do. And so they found that super helpful. But yeah, ultimately, it's getting a sense of where you're heading, and then really sort of troubleshooting. So it could be, if it's a high turnover business, I'll go in and look at all of the data, because data for me, I tend to sort of geek out on it a little bit. It can tell you a lot. How many months is somebody staying before they leave? Is it actually an isolated problem to a particular department or particular manager, or is it actually something that happens across the board? Are people leaving after, let's say, 3 months? Are they leaving after maybe 9 months or a year? What does that look like? And then really getting my head around that, explaining what that then means to that business owner, so they know exactly where their problem's coming from and what's causing it. And then also looking at, okay, well, what is the word on the street? What do the employees actually feel? Because data, well, the numbers will tell you one thing, but opinions, observations, all of those things will tell you something else, and they'll usually, one will help explain the other. So those are the first kind of few steps that I take. Obviously, if it's a business that wants the basic set up, slightly different. I then, for them, I would do a little audit of, okay, what do you have in place? What's working well? What do we need to do to make sure that we're compliant? In terms of legal obligations and things like that. And then sort of looking at, okay, so what does that look like? How are we going to implement this? Is it that we need to prepare a suite of policies? Is it actually that we need to look at employee communication? Is it that we need to do a piece on educating leaders and managers, supervisors, whatever that level might be? Because that's another place where I find a big gap. Yeah. And that's often what leads to these problems, whether it's not being able to manage absence effectively, not being able to manage performance properly, not realizing what mistakes you make as a manager, a people manager, at whatever level you're at, doesn't matter your seniority. Just not realizing actually that is a fundamental part of your role. It's not just something that you do on top of your other stuff.
It's really, what's interesting listening to you talk there is there are so many parallels between what you do and what I do, and it's very much a case of, firstly, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. And it doesn't matter. This is a really relevant point, because people wouldn't necessarily assume that there are KPIs within the HR world, for example. People assume KPIs usually to be financial figures or sales figures or marketing figures or whatever, but they wouldn't necessarily associate like length of employment days or something like that. Which, when you talk about it, it's, of course it's going to be there. It's logical that it's there. Yeah. The second thing as well, you mentioned about people being promoted into a position maybe where they've gone from being, for example, somebody who's working as part of a team to then managing the team. Yeah. Just because you're great at sales, for example, doesn't mean to say you're going to be a great sales manager. Yeah. And I say this to people all the time, just because your top ranked salesperson is fantastic, doesn't mean to say they can manage people. And again, you've mentioned that as well. People don't know what they don't know, and if they don't know how to manage people, then they don't know how to manage people. And unless somebody actually tells you how to do that, then you're not going to necessarily know how to do it. Yeah. And then you said about your client who was the small business that started in the front room.
Yeah.
So many people are in that position
Yes.
where they don't know where they're going, what they want to achieve from it. So it's really interesting to hear you talk about the things that I talk about with people, but you're putting a sort of a personnel human resources spin on that thing, and it's quite fascinating, really. So what would you say are sort of like a typical success story when you start to work with a client? What would you expect to see results that people get when they work with you?
Sure. So let's look at the let's call it the HR basics. That's what my 3 month project. Oh, I can't get my words out. My 3 month project is called my
Yeah.
HR Basics Accelerator, and that, as I say, is applicable to those businesses who either want to prevent employee turnover from happening in the first place, or where they need something in place because they know they're going to grow and they need to be able to do that and scale successfully. So, just finished work with a client, and they basically, what we did is that they were able to articulate first and foremost where they want to head as a business, and they decided that actually they want to do a little bit of wholesale. They're a retailer. They have an online store and a physical store, and they want to therefore then branch into a bit of wholesale. So they've been able to articulate that number one. They hadn't given that thought. They were just doing more of the same. Number two, what we've been able to do is by being really, really clear on what we actually did a big exercise on mapping out what tasks are needed to get you to that. Let's go into the wholesale side of things. What are the day-to-day tasks? What are the new things that are going to need to happen? So almost like not like a time and motion study, but it's like what is the stuff that needs to keep happening for this to become a reality? And then splitting out, okay, well, whose responsibility is this? Is it actually that you're making some of the product, packaging, dispatching it, all of that stuff? Who's doing the marketing? Who's doing the admin? Where do all these tasks sit? And for them, a lot of it was sitting with the two co-owners, who are also partners in life as well. So that was
Right, okay.
that was another interesting dynamic. But one of the things that they shared with me was that actually this has been really helpful for them personally too. So I'll
Oh,
take
okay.
that as
So
a
you're a
win.
marriage counselor as
It
well as an
seems
HR
that way, yeah.
specialist. Yeah.
But yeah, so then we looked at, okay, so that's the future state. These are the roles that we will need to get us there, and these are actually the boundaries that we'll put around each of these roles, so that we know that people aren't stepping on each other's toes, but also that things aren't being missed. And what that meant by doing that exercise was that actually we were able to carve out their time, the two co-owners, so that they're able to focus on the more strategic stuff. That, okay, where do we need to build those relationships to be able to get into wholesale? Who's going to continue to do our marketing, our social media stuff? Who's going to be responsible for that? And taking them away from the weeds. I once worked with somebody a long time ago, when I was at Discovery, and he called it Operation Lawnmower, as in get out of the weeds. So
Right, okay.
I'm claiming that, but yeah, that's kind of what we did for them. They felt that, especially where they live together, their partners in life, as I say, they were constantly thinking about their business, and it was all in their head, and they couldn't, see the wood for the trees. So we're able to carve out time for them so they can focus on the things that they need to focus on, and actually allow their team some level of autonomy with clear expectations, boundaries, guidelines of what they need to be doing, so that the day-to-day stuff is happening, without them needing to sort of helicopter in and help out, or, they're comfortable that after an expectation setting exercise, which I also coach them on how to do, they were comfortable that actually their team are getting on with things.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic. It's really, again, more parallels, planning,
mm,
strategy, tactics, all of those sorts of things. There are so many parallels, and it highlights the understanding that I have of business in terms of, business, everything is intrinsically linked. Your sales aren't going to work well if your operations aren't working well. You're not going
no.
to get the sales in if your marketing isn't working well. You're not going to get the the production output if your staff aren't working well together and everything else. And so many people, they just think there's a problem with one area of business. Now it's really fascinating to hear you talk about the fact you're going in to going in wearing a sort of like an HR hat, if you like, and actually you're impacting areas of the business that you wouldn't necessarily expect somebody who's going in with an HR hat to have influence over, but you're having a really positive influence over that. So they must have been really pleased with the direction that you helped them take the business in, I would assume.
Yeah, their feedback. We had a little feedback session today at the end of our last scheduled meeting at the end of 3 months. And one of the things that stuck in my mind that I was like, oh, that's really nice, is that they said it was the best thing that they had done for their business
Wow.
to work with me. And yeah, I couldn't receive any better compliment or feedback than that. And because they said that it helped them, as you pointed out, it helped them personally as well, on how they need to kind of behave as co-owners of that business. Simple things, like how do you download and what you've done today and what the other one's done today, and that you're not, you're actually spending some time to talk about it, but that it's not overtaking your evening. 5-10 minutes, this is what happened, done. Yeah, so they were super happy. We went through as well some more on the tactical side. We went through, I have a people manager curriculum, so explaining the basics of how to be a successful people manager, because people don't get that training. One of the owners, he had worked in retail for decades, never got training on how to be a successful people manager. And I've seen it myself. I've been in HR, people and culture world for 20 plus years, and I've probably worked in only 2 places where they are very intentional about doing that for their leaders. Sadly, it's the big global businesses, but actually,
Yeah.
there's a need for it at every level, I think. So that was one of the things that we focused on. They said, my goodness, there was so much stuff that I didn't know. They felt more confident in dealing with their people. They came to me and they were saying, oh, we're worried about what they're going to think when we speak to them about these things. So I challenged their thinking a little bit, and they now come at it from a place of curiosity and looking at facts rather than what they think might be happening.
Yeah.
We also did all the other tactical stuff of getting some policies in place and some processes. I helped them set up a new HR system. So all of their rota for their retail operation in the store, they now have the ability to do it on a system rather than on an Excel spreadsheet. It's not compliant from a data protection perspective, but also it takes so much time to do it manually. They now are able to do that much faster. So loads of, I guess, helpful things for them on so many different layers.
Yeah. I came from a family business background. So I left university and joined my family business. And, family barbecues were very much a case of sitting there talking about work the whole time. And my brother's wife and my wife would sit there going, "Oh, God, they're talking about work again." And I've worked with a number of family businesses over the years certainly since I've been doing this. And it is always the case that personal relationships do come into, well, they're bound to, but they come into the business side of things as well. And it being able to separate the two is a very difficult but very needed thing, because people have
Yeah.
to, they were husband and wife first, and the
Yeah.
business usually comes along second. I mean, there might be exceptions to that rule, but as a general rule, people go into it and they set up a business together as a husband and wife because they think it's going to be good. They don't realize the difficulties the other things that can sort of that can foster.
Yeah.
So you were telling me earlier on that you're running a series of webinars and things like that,
Yes,
aren't
I
you?
am. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what's that about?
they're free masterclasses. They're all around retention. So, and I've talked a lot about the HR basics, but my real passion is the retention piece, because I think that a lot of the people problems that business owners face are entirely preventable. They're fixable as well. So the masterclasses or webinars, they're aimed at business owners. So I group CEOs, COOs, MDs, general managers, couples in business. Basically, that they're aimed at those who employ up to 50 people, although if you employ more, welcome to come along. And they're really designed to make things feel much easier, fill in the gaps of what's missing as it relates to the people in their business. So I've got 5, they're starting this Wednesday. Number 1 is like the 5 mistakes that you're making that are causing your people to leave. There's a piece around getting the HR basics in 12 weeks. There's hiring and onboarding. So that's a really important part of the employee life cycle that I find a lot of smaller businesses get wrong. They think that just an informal chat is enough and we can just bring this person on board, which sometimes it might be. And just more around sort of retention. So as I say, they're free to attend. I am providing toolkits as well for those who attend, so they can take that learning and then implement it in their business. It's all highly actionable, so not just waffle and theory. So I'm really excited about them.
Yes, it sounds really good. I think the thing is the fact that you're sort of providing toolkits for people as well. And all too often you'll sit on a webinar and you just think, well, actually that was 45 minutes of my life I'm not going to get back. But
Yeah.
actually these sound really good. I've just got to say something about you talk about the onboarding side of things. I've got a contact of mine. He's running a fantastic business, a VA business, and his onboarding process is probably the most rigorous onboarding process that I've ever heard. You know,
Talk me through it. I'd love to hear.
oh,
If you can share, obviously.
it's yeah, no, it's fantastic the way that he goes about it. Essentially, what he does is he's essentially gets a lot of CVs in at any one particular time, goes through all of the CVs, and he's constantly hiring. He's constantly looking for people because he's looking for a particular type of caliber of individual. So once he gets sort of narrows the CVs down, the next thing he does is he gets people to do sort of like a personality trait test, and he sort of like understands that sort of element of personality. And then they go through sort of like a skills test because he's employing people who need to be at a particular skills level. And he's got a parameter, and it's basically carved in the sand of if you exceed that parameter, then you're not suitable for the role. If you beat that parameter, then you are suitable for the role. So he's got this process that he goes through. It takes him about 6 to 8 weeks to onboard somebody.
Wow. Yeah.
But actually, when he gets to that point where that person is onboarded, one of the things that he's found is they are so invested themselves that actually they realize that they're going to be working for a company who have exceptionally high standards. They're very, very well invested. And then once they get through that period of the interview process and then they've been offered the role, once they've got to that particular position, they're then in a place where they know they're going to be looked after
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they recognize the fact that the company has spent 6 to 8 weeks actually recruiting them. So they value their employees. They realize that there's a significant cost involved in doing that. And actually, when they go in and they start working, they know they're going to get regularly trained up, they're going to get upskilled, they're going to have all of these sorts of things. The employee benefits are there. They're paid above market rate for the role that they're doing as well. So as a result of that, they're very appreciated and very, very well looked after. And he talked me through the whole recruitment process a couple of weeks ago, actually. And I sat there and I thought, wow, that's really good. But you can see because he's got this very stringent process that he's operating,
Yeah.
um, that the caliber of the individual he's getting is much higher as well.
Yeah. But it's
Um,
what it's probably doing as well is reflecting to those individuals that actually this is the stat, like you said, they're held to a very high standard, and the type of work that they're doing as a VA service,
mhm,
they need to be dependable, they need to be reliable, they need to have that attention to detail, and that's what they're exactly what they're assessing, and
yeah,
they are assessing for the exact skills, knowledge, experience, attributes that role requires, which is,
yeah.
it's fantastic to hear.
And they're trained as well, and they're trained in a multiple of different skills. So they might join the business having a skill set in, let's say, 3 areas, but they know they're going to receive training and very
Yes.
comprehensive training in another
Yeah.
3 areas. So actually, it's making them far more rounded and
Mm.
I suppose. more engaged employees, providing a better service for the clients, and it just means that it's able to sort of able to move forwards. And I was just very, I was very impressed. And I'm a bit of an empath, that's kind of my personality. I like to see people do well. I like to see people feel supported, and those things are very, very important to me. And as a result of that, you see that you can see on the one end of the scale, you've got this fantastic example of how you should be recruiting. And then I was working with a business a number of years ago where honestly, the toxicity within the business was just
Mm.
horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Their turnover was very, very high. I remember sitting down talking to the managing director about it, and I said, your staff turnover is really, really high. And he goes, oh, yeah, it's just the type of people that we have to recruit for the role. And I said, well, actually, no, it's not. It's not. It's how the people are being looked after. So that relationship that I had with him didn't last for very long. Needless to say, I didn't
Mm.
like being told that. But and this is the thing, but you've got these two polar opposites. You've got one where a company isn't looking after its staff, and they've got this massive rotation of staff, and then you've got this other
Yeah.
one, and that have got such a fantastic and stringent onboarding policy and
Yeah.
process that the people come in and that they're just
They're
really
just ready to go, aren't
ready
they?
to get up and ready
Yeah.
to go with it, and
Yeah.
it's really, really good to see.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping, I think people like you are change makers, because I think what you're out there doing is you're out there making a difference to people's lives within the business, and
Yeah.
making a difference to the company's life, as the employers' lives as well, because
Yeah.
you're reducing that level of stress. And I
Yeah.
think it's a very valuable thing that you're providing. And I'm really grateful for the fact that you've said yes, I'm happy to be one of your business
Oh,
boost
of
experts, Steve,
course.
because it means a lot to have that kind of really good quality individuals as part of the group and everything else. So we're getting towards sort of like the end of time now, Maritza. So if people want to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you? What's the best way to contact you?
Yeah, I typically hang out on LinkedIn, hang out in inverted commas, but yeah, that's where you can find me. So Maritsa I, all one word, on LinkedIn, the LinkedIn profile. Yeah, all of my contact details are out there. I am happy to, I offer a free 1 hour consultation. We'll go through a very quick sort of overview of the stuff that I've talked to you about, really, and that sort of troubleshooting piece. If you don't have an hour, I can do it in 15 minutes if it's for high turnover as well. So yeah, happy to speak to people. I love hearing from business owners. Even if we decide that it's not a good fit, I still get, sort of feedback and insight on what's going on out there. And yeah, I just love helping business owners to really get to that point where actually they feel that sort of overwhelm and that stress of, oh my god, who's going to resign this week, or oh
Yeah,
my god, I'm too worried to speak to my people, or all of that kind of stuff. I really love helping them lift that stress from their shoulders and that weight off their shoulders, and getting them to a place where they're more profitable in their business because they're not wasting all that money, but also that their people are getting a great experience as well, and then delivering, really great customer service, they're productive, all of that kind of stuff. So yeah.
fantastic. Well, I just want to thank you very much for your time today,
Thank
Maritza. I
you.
really do appreciate it. And like she says, if you want to get hold of her, you can get hold of her on LinkedIn. And if you can't find her, then you'll be able to find her through my connections as well. So that's fantastic. Well, you have yourself an amazing rest of the day. And
Thank you. You
and obviously in 12 degrees worth of heat out in Greece, you're not exactly going to be getting a suntan, are you? But I'm sure the weather will improve fairly soon for you.
yeah, fingers crossed.
Fantastic. Take care,
Thanks.
Maritza.
Take care.